you historically from outside the Bible show that the historical details inside the Bible are true. Luke, who wrote the Gospel of Luke, was a meticulous historian. Now, the evidence that supports that in an overwhelming way is Luke chapter 3, beginning at verse 1, where Luke writes, "In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, Herod, tetrarch of Galilee," I mean, who gives a rip who was tetrarch of Galilee? But Luke is recording, Herod was tetrarch of Galilee. His brother Philip, tetrarch of Iturea and Trachonitis, who could give a rip about who was tetrarch of Iturea and Trachonitis? And Lysanias, tetrarch of Abilene, well, who could care less about who was tetrarch of Abilene? During the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, the word of the God came to John, son of Zechariah, in the desert. I used to be put to sleep by those verses. But because of the exact question you're asking, well, come on, what's the evidence outside the Bible that the historical references inside the Bible are true? It's embarrassingly wealthy when it comes to Luke chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. All of those tetrarchs, all of those governors, Pontius Pilate, and obviously Tiberius Caesar, are all verified by both archaeology, the digs and the tablets found, as well as the historical record. So what becomes clear is Luke was not making this up, and this is verified by writings of Roman historians and by archaeological evidence outside the Bible that Luke chapter 3 is spot on in a way that puts me to sleep. But when it comes to trying to ascertain historical veracity, it's a home run.
Well, good old Cliffy says it's a home run. So if that's a home run, then this would be a home run as well. I mean, according to outside sources, President Ronald Reagan existed as the president of the United States. He lived in the White House, which we know that we can attest through history of outside sources from the DC comic books that the White House actually existed, as well as Reagan was president. Now, who gives a rip about whether or not the White House existed in the United States in the scope of the whole world? That wouldn't make any difference. And whoever was congressmen or senators or governors within the United States at that time frame, why would any of that matter? I mean, previous to Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter was president. But who cares? DC Comics was spot on. It's a home run that Superman came from another planet and was saving the day in America. I mean, if you want even more proof of a home run, we know that the Lincoln Memorial actually exists. You can go see it today. You can witness with your own eyes that the Lincoln Memorial is in Washington, D.C. in the United States of America. And since we know that President Obama was president for 8 years in America, we can document this through video, we can document it through writings, we can document it through all sorts of outside sources from Marvel Comics. So therefore, Spider-Man and all the adventures of Spider-Man, saving the world, becoming Venom, joining with the symbiote and becoming Venom and fighting with the Avengers and saving the day, fighting the Green Goblin, all those things must be attested to as true because Spider-Man existed and the Marvel comic writers wrote in there that he was at the Lincoln Memorial and met President Obama. And here we are just going into a little bit more antiquity, where you had Captain America and the invaders, where we often wonder if that team has stayed together, that they, during the time frame of World War II, which we can validate that World War II was an actual event that occurred, and the leaders of all the nations that participated was actual events. And people died, different soldiers and airmen and Marines, but who gives a rip about them? There were other leaders, but who gives a rip about them? But they state that they were at the White House and defended the White House and defended the president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, at that time frame. And we know that through outside sources that Franklin D. Roosevelt actually existed. So it's a home run that Captain America was frozen in ice and after World War II, and then was revived and was living in our modern day times. And that they had a human torch who was a robot, and all these other superpowered beings were helping America defeat the Axis during World War II. So, I mean, it blows my mind that people don't believe in Captain America or believe in Superman or believe in Spider-Man. You see, at the end of the day, just because a book can quote some certain events that actually happened or certain people that actually existed does not necessarily mean that the entire story is real or valid. If that was the case, then every Christian should also believe that Achilles existed and that he was the son of Zeus, that he's a demigod who fought in Troy, because we know that Troy existed. And who gives a rip about, Jason and the Argonauts, and who gives a rip about, anything else as far as sirens and cyclops exist? We know that the story must be true because the city of Troy actually existed and Macedonia, Greece, fought against Troy. So therefore, the story is absolutely true. You see, this type of mindset is what tricks Christians into thinking that their biblical narrative must be true because certain people that can be historically verified were present within the story. So that would make many of the stories and myths that many people do not believe in today, it will make them all true. I mean, the Viking story would then be true since Vikings worship Odin and they worship Thor and Sith and all these other people, that simply because the places that they named within their stories existed. The kings and queens and warriors that they had in their service existed. So therefore, those stories must be true. They have to be true. There's no other way to look at it. Unless you're only looking at it through the blind lens of your rose-colored glasses to say that, well, everybody else is telling a false narrative, but yet the one that I believe in is telling the truth. And here's the historicity that backs it up. If you're going to utilize that as your case for explaining the historical evidence of your religion, that same thing must be applied to every other myth, story, fairy tale that you encounter, because for the most part, the overwhelming majority of these religions and fairy tales have actual historical evidence of places and people that actually existed. So therefore, every Christian should also accept Islam as well. We know Muhammad existed. We know that he was told the story by the angel Gabriel. 200 years later, the story is related. And then a few hundred years later, the book is actually produced. So therefore, everything within the Quran must be true because we can identify within the Quran places and people who actually existed. So why aren't you Muslim? Why don't you believe in Islam? This is the question that I have for the Christians who will buy into this form of rhetoric. But what you know is that just because a story encompasses some of these factual things does not necessarily make the story a reality. It doesn't mean that a man walked on water. It doesn't mean that he healed people who had demons inside of them, or that he fed 6,000 people with a two-piece fish sandwich that he got from KFC. Doesn't mean that all those things actually happen as well. Those types of things are the separators within the story that allows you to realize that it's all simply a mythological event. But if you want to keep believing people like Cliff because it satisfies your need in order to have a religion and to have a God that you are subservient to have someone else that you can blame all your ills on and give credit to the things that you accomplished, then be my guest. Go right ahead. But to expect other people to accept your version of the truth simply because it has a tiny bit of historical value, well, that is just the pot calling the kettle black. And we call that hypocrisy. So always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.